All right, we're live. Hello, everyone. It is good to see you all. It is a Monday morning here. We have two very special guests today, George.
Who's that?
Dojo Kun and Thunderbuns Fulton.
That's great.
How are you guys?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Doing good.
We did this show last week, and it was very heavily favored towards DC Comics, let's say.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Oh,
Doing good.
Uh-oh.
We did this show last week, and it was someone has. Hang on.
Is it you, Rob?
Mine was muted. Wasn't me?
Yeah, it's not me either. I think it's Rob.
Is it me? I think it's me.
I didn't have YouTube open, so it had to be you.
Yeah, it's not me either. It disappears when you put yourself on mute, Rob, just so you know. Anyway, what happened was last week we had a list of top 10 recommendations. Go ahead, Rob.
Yes. I'm saying it's clearly Rob.
I normally don't drink booze before 5 p.m., but I knew I was coming on this show, so I made a rare exception.
Probably wise.
So here's an Irish whiskey for you, Rob. Cheers.
We did a top 10 recommendations for someone who wants to get into comics but doesn't know where to start, kind of thing. It was very heavily favored towards DC books. No.
Only on one person's list. Mine was very diverse.
Okay. Leroy's recommendations were very heavily favored towards DC, which is fair. He's a DC fan. We're not shaming Leroy here, George.
No.
But Leroy also recommended that we get some Marvel people on to maybe recommend some Marvel books that people might like. So we've called in Dojo Kun and Thunderbuns, and here we are. But before we get to that, we'll do the same thing that we do every week and say hello to the chat. We have B-Rose in the house. What's the whole deal with the monkey thing? Is it just like an ARO thing? Why are they always talking monkeys?
Mr. Von Stugel that started that.
Mr. Von Stugel, Dojo Kun. Hockey's here. Good to see Hockey. Monkey Magic. Did you guys have Monkey Magic?
No, I don't know what that is.
Nope.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We should look that up one time. I got Amanda B's in the house. Scrolling down, George is here. Amanda's building her puzzle. Have you done yours, George?
Yeah, completely done. Already put away. But I only got the 500-piece one. I think she got the 1,000-piece one.
What do you mean put away? Like what do you do?
I put it together, and then I took it apart, put it back in the box, and put it away.
Is that what you do? You finish the puzzle and then you take it apart again?
Yeah. Isn't that what everybody does?
What are you going to do with it?
I'd probably leave it put together. Manifesto. I'm going on yours and Dojo Kun's show soon. I don't know when it is. You can have
Thursday.
to tell me again. Thursday. All right, cool.
Yep, this Thursday.
Beautiful. Let's have a look. Scrolling down. Random task.
Hopefully you'll be there.
Probably. It's clearly Rob. He's the only one without headphones on. Yes, I borrow ideas. When in doubt, blame Rob. God damn it, Rob from Johnny Cage. Fred Durst is in the house. All right, well, that's the best start to a show that anyone's ever had, ever. So why don't we kick it off with Dojo Kun with his top 10 with Johnny Cage. That's how puzzles work, Rob. Joe's like, I wish I could have gone a Bancroft show instead of this one today.
I don't mind slumming it once in a while.
By the way, I don't have a list. It's just Dojo and Joe. I'm just here to be comedic relief, I guess, with Rob. So,
well, you can add commentary to my picks, George, because the weekend got away from me, and I was not able to put together near the presentation that Dojo Kun has. So,
okay.
I'll welcome any comments or insight you have on my picks.
Well, thank you so much.
And so will I, George. You can go ahead and pick them apart if you want.
Okay, thank you.
I'm pretty set in my ways. I'm pretty, decisive. But at the same time, this was a difficult list to put together because Wow, to narrow it down to 10 was very difficult. So, Rob, are you sharing the
Yeah,
document?
it's all good. I just
Okay.
want to say I love how seriously like you and George take this. Like it just shows the love of comics that you guys have.
Oh yeah, this
Thank you.
my leg was bouncing the whole time I was putting together, and Dee said, "What are you so worried about?" And I said, "No, this is just cool."
It's excitement.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, my number 10. It's a huge long run with Walt Simonson on the Mighty Thor. It's 337 through 382. However, understanding that this is an attempt to, show somebody who wants to pick up these comic books for the first time and get them into comics, I focus on issues 337, 338, and 339, which is the introduction of Beta Ray Bill / Beta Ray Thor. And Rob, before we came on, asked me, what's the appeal? And I think that, in addition to the fact that it's another hammer wielder, it's an alien. So that's kind of interesting. The fact that this alien was deemed by Odin to be worthy to obviously wield Mjolnir. But more than that, this was before we were saturated with everybody who looks at the damn hammer can pick it up. This is, long before that sort of thing happened. So this was a rare occasion. There were a couple around this time. I think Steve Rogers and the guys of The Captain picked up the hammer at around this time as well. But this was super rare. It was exciting to those of us who are fans of Thor. And that's why it made it to my top 10 list.
Joe, what do you think about this one?
I think it's a good one. I was kind of struggling earlier today because I knew that I wanted to pick something from Simonson's run on Thor, but I wasn't sure what I was going to pick. And in the end, I figured Brian would probably have it. So I ended up not going with a Thor pick. But I would agree, this is excellent. And Simonson had such a fabulous run on Thor that there's lots of different stories you could choose from. But one of the things I'll say that I like about him choosing this Beta Ray Bill introduction is that Walt Simonson, and for anybody who's not familiar with his work, he's a writer and artist, primarily known for his artwork. But he had this run on Thor, which is considered one of the all-time great runs. And one of the things that he said when he was talking about Beta Ray Bill and how he came up with the idea is that Thor was this guy who's like the epitome of masculinity and beauty at the same time. And he lives in this world, Asgard, this realm of it's just beauty everywhere. And he wanted to show that, as Brian was talking about, when you think about who is worthy to pick up the hammer of Thor, it has nothing to do with aesthetics. And it all has to do with heart, what's on the inside. So Simonson wanted to come up intentionally with a very ugly, weird-looking character and show that you could have somebody who is on the outside, physically weird-looking or ugly or whatever, but their nobility is on the inside, and they're every bit the hero as a pretty boy like Thor.
Well said.
And it's funny, like whenever I hear people talk about Thor, they're always like, "I want to see the Beta Ray Bill." Why?
He was the first person that I remember that picked up Thor's hammer that wasn't Thor. No, I'm like Brian said, there was other characters, but it was never really such a well thought out story to me. Like it was always kind of more just to show something different. But Beta Ray was worthy of the hammer. Remember, they were in that scene together. Like he was protecting his race. It was a misunderstanding when they had this confrontation. And he was protecting his race. And when he picked up that hammer, no one had seen something like that before. And to go back to that cover, the way he's bursting out on that cover, and he has that little side part of the cover broken with the price and everything on that, I had never seen anything like that before. That issue was the first ever non-Spider-Man comic book I ever bought, ever. Was Thor 337.
Wow, very cool. Joe's gone away for a second, so
I'm here.
There he is.
I'm pulling stuff from my library to show on camera.
Oh wow!
What's up?
And chuck your number 10s in chat if you have them, guys, as well. What have you got for us, Joe?
Okay, I'm gonna go with I think it's probably an unconventional pick. Some might argue it's not even legal, but I'm going with it anyway. And I'm gonna say let me grab something real quick. There's something called the Official Handbook of the Marvel Universe that Marvel started publishing in the early 80s. I believe it was in 82. Now, let me get the light off of it. So they published a version where it was basically an issue's worth of comic, but it was encyclopedia entries for characters and locations and stuff. So, like, your first issue in 82 would be like A, Adam Warlock to C, Cersei. And then you'd have entries in there with characters, and it would have artwork, and then it would also have an entry. And it would say things like real name, occupation, legal status, former aliases, first appearance, group affiliation, base of operations. So there's all this biographical information, right? So the reason why I talk about this is because this did a couple of things which had a huge impact on the comic book industry in general, as well as Marvel specifically. One is that it showed that the Marvel Universe, while at once seemingly so big that you could never get into all of it, when they started putting out these official handbooks, it showed that you actually could learn a whole lot about the Marvel Universe without going out and spending thousands of dollars hoping that you enjoyed these stories. You could actually just open up one of these books and you could find out about a character like Bullseye. And if you liked the character and the description and a little bit of the artwork that you see down here, he's fighting with Elektra, and that's taken from the actual books. So you could say, oh, okay, so if I want to go get his first appearance, then I'm going to pick up Daredevil 131. It also would talk about impactful storylines. So you might say, Daredevil, Man Without Fear. What's that about? And then suddenly you find out that you're reading one of the all-time greatest comic book arcs ever. So for that reason, because if I was talking to either a comic book reader who had never read Marvel or someone who'd never read comics, I would say, depending on the person, again, I have different picks for different types of people, kind of like what George did. He picked different people from the chat, which I thought was very cool, and came up with recommendations that he thought those people specifically would like. I'm not as cool as George, so my picks are, if you're this type of a person, you might like this introduction to the Marvel Universe. So if you're the type of person that you don't really want to jump into something because you think there's just too much information and you have no idea where to start, then these handbook issues, and the nice thing is these are collected in several different formats. So this is like the most inexpensive one. I think it was $16 for this update 89, and this is hundreds of pages worth of content. You can go from anything as cheap as that, like here's a schematic of Iron Man's armor, something like that, which is just newsprint, no color, nothing, all the way up to full color hardcover collections if you want to go with the fancy stuff. So that's my really number 2. Cool.
Yeah, I really like that. I love those little character bios and with the the abilities and all that kind of stuff. I think that's cool. And it's a cool choice.
Sorry, one last thing I wanted to mention is that if George, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, it was the stats, not really stats, but it was the collected information in the official handbook that led to the creation of the X-Men 93 cards, where they had the bios on the back, and they actually decided to go with like power rankings so that you could see how powerful they were relative to other people in this card set.
I wasn't aware of that.
Love it. That's sick.
So to Joe's point there, I'm one of the people who absolutely loved that series and collected everything. And with that in mind, I emulated that with Dojo Kun Annual Compendium. I did a very similar setup with that in mind because I loved those so much.
I'm doing the exact same thing with the Outlier universe.
Excellent. I can't wait for it then.
Mo says, I'm thinking of making a guide to the ARO verse, 600 pages, but no room for Machete Meerkat.
Oh,
Mate, he's unreal. We've got a couple of 10s in the chat. Daredevil 226 to 233, Born Again.
Brilliant.
Welcome back, Frank.
Is that Punisher related?
I'm guessing it is.
That.
Punisher, yeah.
Is it? Okay.
I'm pretty sure there's someone else, but I can't see them. All right. George, what do you think of those choices so far?
Joe's choice would be tough if I was trying to recommend it to like a young person. I don't know if they'd want to read basically an encyclopedia of characters. But for someone like you who hasn't read Marvel, I would say that would be an excellent choice. Brian's, that would be on my top 10 list for sure for Marvel.
I have a pick for young people coming up.
Ooh, good, diverse. I like it.
All right, what's you got, Dojo?
Okay, so let me now open this back up. And at number 9, I have the run of Iron Man with Bob Layton on art. 116 through 153 is really the best, run on it. But I focus on just a couple of areas. It was hard to even narrow it down to this. As you can see, I listed all of the villains that he faced there. That was a significant era in his life. Demon in a Bottle is one of the stories that is referenced many, many times where he struggled with his alcoholism. In my personal opinion, I think maybe it was solved a little too quickly, but we're talking comic books, and if they drew it out too long, I think they'd lose readers. So it was a significant event in his life. 123 through 128 is really the crux of that one. I had to throw in 149 and 150 because I just loved his confrontation with Dr. Doom and the time travel that was involved. I won't spoil it any further than that, but wow, that was a great two-issue arc. And then lastly, 155 is the first Marvel issue without the approved by the Comics Code Authority since its inception. I mean, obviously there were stories before that became a part of the comic books, but this is the first time that Marvel had a book that didn't have that stamp of approval on it because it dealt, this issue was called The Back Getters, and it dealt with drug use.
What do you say to drugs, George?
Say no to drugs.
Say no to drugs.
Joe, what do you think of this run? Have you read this?
It's a great one. I haven't read the entire run, but I am familiar with the story. And I know I read at least one of those issues. Or, I may have read the run. It's been so long. But yeah, that was actually one that I was going to look into a little bit more and pick it. And I thought, Brian, he's got to have this one on there. So I'm going to let that one go.
Is it true that Iron Man wasn't actually that popular until recently? Or is
Yes.
that,
Very. There were times during his publication history where I would have considered him a D-list character.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because his height prior to the MCU, his height of popularity really was with the Avengers, and he was never more than a B-list character. So he was one of those guys that had a dedicated fan base, but it was never a best-selling book.
I found that hard to understand because I love this character.
Mm-hmm.
I've read it since I started reading comics.
So was he just not? Was it a good comic series, and people just didn't appreciate it, or why wasn't he popular?
Well, there was a time where the art was, in my opinion, mediocre, and I think it was written as just let's see if this will fly. But then they started giving it more attention and putting better talent on it, and I think it started picking up. And then his participation in the Avengers improved as well around this same time period.
I think the second part of Jasper's statement has a bit of a point. You're going to be as good as your villains. And I'm not sure Iron Man has the best villains. The movie worked because Marvel didn't sell the rights off to it. That's what they had to work with, right? They didn't have Spider-Man. They didn't have the X-Men.
Oh.
What did they have left? They had Iron Man. It worked great because they had it in Jon Favreau's hands, but his villains are not my favorite.
It was though, because like if they had the X-Men, if they had Spider-Man, they might have screwed that up.
Yeah,
they could have. I mean, it was his in the comics. His I don't want to say his popularity was very up and down because he tended to be popular for a while and then not for a while. But I would say, like Brian said, the quality of the art varied, and then also because, as George pointed out, he didn't have a lot of great villains. So, in my opinion, one of the best things about Iron Man prior to the MCU was that for the people who really liked the series, there were standout moments. You know, like when James Rhodes, his best friend Rhodey, had to take over the Iron Man mantle because Tony was basically physically incapacitated and couldn't do it. And people got to see what it was like, you know. Again, it's similar to Beta Ray Bill picking up the hammer of Thor and taking on the mantle, the responsibility. You got to see with Iron Man, if Iron Man was no longer quote unquote worthy to be Iron Man, is there somebody who could pick up the slack? And it turns out there was. And I thought Rhodey was an excellent Iron Man.
Yes.
Who went on to become War Machine.
Right.
Okay, what have you got for number 9, Joe? And chuck in number 9s in chat too, please, everyone, if you want me to read them.
Yeah, so I had mentioned that I had a pick for young people coming up, and this was one of my... it's one of those comics that gets criticized a lot by fanboys, but I don't care. I like it. Power Pack.
Power Pack is great. I love Power Pack.
So this was a series that was written by Louise Simonson and drawn by June Brigman, and basically it's about a family, a mom and a dad and some preteen kids, and through this weird happenstance they all get powers, and it was essentially like the Brady Bunch or the Cosby Show, in the sense that it showed this wholesome family who had their ups and downs, but at the end of the day, they always had each other. And so I was a kid who grew up in a dysfunctional home. Most of my childhood, I was unhappy. And so I gravitated towards stories like this where, the kids loved each other and the parents got along great. And, the family bond was the unifying thing instead of the divisive thing. So in the 80s, if you were a kid and you didn't think that you were too cool for school, then this was one of those titles where you could read this and you'd get all the action and adventure, but you'd also get that family dynamic.
So the fun thing about this series for me was when this series came out, like everyone always said that Spider-Man was like the character for kids, right? Because he was a teen. But when I was young, he was a graduate student and he was engaged to like a runway model. Like there was no young character books. And then there was the Star line of comics like Ewoks and Care Bears. Like if you're 9 years old, you'd rather, wear a dress to school than read those comics. You don't want to do that. What was the only title for kids that was adventurous and fun, but still had like, problems for kids? It was Power Pack. This series was written tremendously. And by the way, I don't know if you know this or not, Joe. I'm guessing you do. But the parents in this series were based off of Walt and Weezy.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I borrowed ideas when George was young.
A couple of 9s in the chat. Marvel's 1994, 1-4. The greatest moments in the Marvel Universe seen from the perspective of a news photographer. Brilliant art by Alex Ross. Wolverine Jungle Adventures. Are these ringing a bell for any of you guys?
Oh, yeah.
Wolverine. Absolutely.
Wolverine Jungle Adventure was illustrated by Mignola, but written by Walt Simonson. A lot of Simonson love today so far, 10 through 9.
Leroy says, I have this stream on mute while I watch Nolan's Batman trilogy. I refuse to take part in this heresy. Marvel is barely better than manga.
It's okay to be wrong, Leroy.
Oh, Dojo's throwing some fire. All right, so number 8.
Oh, okay. Yep. Let's get to that. Number 8. At number 8, I have the Infinity Gauntlet series, 1 through 6. Don't need to focus. I'm going to start, though, by saying that although George Perez started the art on this, Ron Lim picked it up. He catches a lot of heat because to be compared to Perez has to be difficult. I still like Ron Lim's work, but honestly, it doesn't hold a candle to Perez. On the other hand, the reason I think this would be a good starting point for somebody, picking up comics for the first time, this is an opportunity to see all of these, a vast majority of the Marvel Universe working together to face the threat of Thanos. And, it'll bring you the true story that the movies were based on. True story, listen to me, as if this was real. Anyway, you get the idea. And it features some of my favorite characters. It would be hard not to, but as you can see, She-Hulk is prominent. I like that a lot. But yeah, and the fact that Mephisto is there almost in the capacity of the Watcher, like he was waiting for an opportunity to take advantage of everything that went on. I think it's a great series.
You read this one, George?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I actually like Ron Lim's art more than Brian does, I think, because I really this story started in the pages of Silver Surfer. That's where Jim Starlin kind of put the initial seeds for it, and Lim was the artist there, so I was used to his style of art. So I like the series a lot. Good choice.
I like Ron Lim's work on X-Men 2099. Hold on, 2099. Did you not?
George hates X-Men. So
we don't say that word.
Because it's X-Men, I see. Okay. Well, it was a whole different group of characters, so maybe you'd like
Jasper says they released an Omni of Power Pack last year.
Mm-hmm. It was Volume 1 and Volume 2.
Oh, okay.
Very cool. All right, Joe, what have you got? Number 8.
Yeah, so let's see. Okay, so yeah, George doesn't like X-Men, so he's in for a treat. So I've got my next 2. It's almost like they're a 1A and a 1B. So I'm just listing them in the order that they were published because one leads into another. And so the first one is a storyline called Mutant Massacre. And it was published in 1986. And it was a crossover between New Mutants, Power Pack, Thor, Uncanny XMen, XFactor, and then Daredevil was kind of like an epilogue issue. And the reason why I picked this is because for people who think that comics are just for kids and they're not really interesting enough for adults or that's not mature reading or anything, this was one of the events that, in my opinion, kind of said, comics are for grown-ups too. And I think it was probably in response to what DC was doing at the time. Watchmen kind of shook the comic book world, and Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, things like that were starting to happen. So with Mutant Massacre, you had this idea that there's this group of villains assembled by this guy called Mr. Sinister, who turned out for a long time to be a really savage villain in the Marvel Universe. And he gave the X teams across the board all kinds of trouble. And he assembled this group of mutant assassins who specialized in hunting other mutants. So this was a gritty story. And basically, he sends them down into the sewers below New York City, and they mass murder this group of mutants called the Morlocks. And a lot of them were their mutant powers were either manifested externally, and it made them look non-human, or they were disfigured because of the mutated genes in their bodies or whatever. So they would live underground to stay out of sight and not be hassled by the people above. And it was a story that was well, I won't go into too much detail. We got other stuff to talk about. I'll just say that it was one of those ones where, as a young teen, I was reading the story going, wow, this is like a whole other level to comic books.
Who came up with the idea for the crossover event? Do you know, Joe?
Jim Shooter.
It was Louise Simonson.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Claremont wanted to do it in just the X-Men books, and she said, no, it's too big of a story. We're going to cross it over into all the X titles.
Nice.
And it got involved in the Power Pack because she was with Power Pack, and it got involved in Thor because her husband was working on Thor. That was her idea. This is a Simonson love fest today.
Yeah, no, it really is. The Simonsons were all over Mutant Massacre, and then another story arc, which I'll talk about on my next pick. But yeah, so one of the things that just devastated a lot of readers, including me, is that the X-Men got rocked in this issue. Angel was crucified and his wings were mutilated and they ended up getting amputated. That was one. Colossus got paralyzed because he got hit with these projectiles that basically went through his armor, and Magneto tried to fix him, but Magneto's not a surgeon and ended up paralyzing Colossus. Nightcrawler, I think, went into a coma. I mean, it was just they got rocked to the point where they had to recruit some new members, and that's how Psylocke joined the X-Men.
This sounds awesome.
There you go.
George, why do you hate the X-Men so much?
I found most of the stories to be extraordinarily dull and long-winded. Everyone talks about the Dark Phoenix saga. How many issues did that take? 8? That should have been 2 issues. There's so many characters. There's never any central focal point. Wolverine became this huge popular character, a character which I never liked. The ones that I found more interesting, like Colossus and Nightcrawler, kind of fell by the wayside. I just thought it was extraordinarily overrated. Like, not slightly overrated, extraordinarily overrated. When X-Men was selling big, Frank Miller's Daredevil was way, way, way better. Walt Simonson's Thor was way, way, way better. I just never understood the popularity of it. And it kind of grew further because everyone just seemed to love it so much. And I don't even know if they know why they love it. These stories they tell me that are so great have all been kind of undone. How long back has Jean Grey been? Like, she's not dead. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter.
The thing about the stories being undone, I think that's a lot of writers in the past decade or so paying no attention and no respect to history. I don't like it when they undo these stories. Those stories, like you were saying, a lot of us felt that they were super well written, and you're going to see them later in my list. I'm sure you knew that. They were incredible characterization, team dynamics, and etc. So to undo that, I think, is undoing a lot of history that they should have left be.
Random task number 8, Fantastic Four, 242 to 244, 257 to 262. John Byrne's Galactus ending with the trial of Reed Richards.
Great.
Nice pick.
Yeah.
Great pick.
Don't read that one.
Leroy is making up things. I thought there was another one, but I might have missed it. So let's move on to 7. Dojo, what have you got?
Okay. Number 7. Oh yeah, here's a sort of an unconventional pick for me because I'm so into superheroes. This series, The Nam, based on the Vietnam conflict, went 84 issues, which I was kind of surprised to see. But the 3 that really struck a chord with me are issues 79 through 81. So if you're going to focus on any, it would be those 3 stories from the Battle of Saigon and the Tet Offensive. And this art by Michael Golden is just phenomenal. And I have to be honest, when I first saw his art back in the day, I didn't appreciate it like I do now. It sort of grew on me. And the more I see it now, I guess in this day and age, in my age, the more I appreciate his stuff. It's some good work.
Just the chat's going off. Leroy says, I think we need more Marvel books based on who is going to sleep with Jean Grey. Von Stugel says George's soul is turning to dust with all this X talk. George is so correct. Claremont's X-Men, in my experience, is very dense.
Who said that?
Jasper Plan 9.
Jasper. Hmm.
George is gatekeeping, apparently. George says, am I the gatekeeper or are you the keymaster? This is getting real weird real quick.
That's from Ghostbusters. You don't know the
read this one?
Ghostbusters? I've read the first few issues of Nom by Michael Gold, and I haven't read the specific issues that Dojo is talking about.
Thunderbuns?
I have not. I did not pick the Nom. I've never read it. It's one of those where I always wanted to get to after I became an adult. I wasn't interested in a kid. I liked G.I. Joe when I was growing up, and to me, the Nom seemed too, quote-unquote, grown up, and I didn't think I would like it. But after becoming an adult and learning about comic book history and, you know, some of the greats in the industry, this and Sergeant Rock are the ones that I always wanted to get to and just haven't yet.
The fact that this went 84 issues is a testament to how well this was written. And that's no small feat to go that many issues on a book based on a military conflict.
This book was based, Rob, in real time. So as a month went by, it was a month later in the book.
Wow.
It wasn't like one issue ended, the next
Crazy.
issue began. So it was very unique.
It's like a
Crazy.
7-year story, basically.
Okay, that's bananas. What do you have for us, Joe?
Wait,
So
number 7's in the chat?
Yeah, but Dojo's first, then Joe, then chat, yeah?
Wasn't that our number 7's or no? I'm sorry. My fault.
Joe
No.
hasn't given his number 7 yet.
Oh, my fault.
He's just trying to cut me off before I get to more X-Men.
Oh,
Oh, you saw through that, did you?
So in Fall of the Mutants, I mentioned how Mr. Sinister sent the Marauders down into the sewers of New York City, and he mass murdered, and the group of them mass murdered the Morlocks. Almost none of them survived. There was just a small group that were left over. And, you know, Angel got crucified and, you know, heavy casualties, right? Well, the way it was written, the X-Men showed up at one point, and then separately, XFactor showed up. And XFactor sustained far fewer casualties than the X-Men because the X-Men were basically in there on their own. And when XFactor came into the fight in a different location, Thor and Power Pack also showed up. This is what George was talking about, where Louise Simonson, the writer of Power Pack, and then Thor, who was written and drawn by Walt Simonson, they came in and they basically gave XFactor backup. Now, XFactor were a team created in the 80s. They were the original 5 X-Men who had left the team prior. So now they had their own book. It was Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Angel, and Beast. So at the end of the Mutant Massacre, Wolverine is in the tunnels and he catches a whiff of Jean Grey, her scent trail, right? And I know, George, I know. I couldn't think of a way to describe that wouldn't get giggles. But anyway, moving on. Maybe she had a burrito that day. I don't know. So Wolverine says, you know, it's Jean. And then it's basically, it ends, right? There's no investigation. He doesn't tell anybody because he doesn't know what to make of this. Now, the reason why that was important is because the Phoenix Saga, which George was talking about, and which is not going to be my pick, George, you're welcome. In that saga, she dies, right? Well, when XFactor was formed, it was basically a secret team. And they decided instead of being a public-facing team like the X-Men were, they would operate in secret, and they would try to help mutants in secret. So as a reader, I'm sitting there waiting. Oh, wow, XFactor showed up. So now are they going to find out that Jean Grey's alive? You know, what's going to happen here? Well, go into Fall of the Mutants, and that's my pick. So this is a story arc. It was published in January to March of '88. Basically what happened is that Mutant Massacre was so successful that they just went right into planning the next one. And This is a big deal for a couple of reasons. One is that, and I'm not going to go into all the details of the stories because I want people to check this out, but I'll mention 2 reasons why it's important and why it's on my list. One is that the crossover sold so well. This was in '88, so this was like at the height of the build up to the launch of Image Comics. You know, the Image founders, they were all working at by this time. Everything was going great. Sales were through the roof. X-Men comics were selling between 500 to 800,000 issues a month, every month. And what we had was, I'll note one story element that was huge, and then I'll talk about 2 things about the business that were huge. One is that this crossover, Fall of the Mutants, it elevated the sales on all X-Men books across the board. And it was an event where the publishers, the executives basically said, wow, we've really got something here. And from that point on, they said, we're going to have a crossover event once a year, every year, because they figured they're going to replicate this every year, right? Replicate. You're welcome. So that was a big deal because it changed the publishing paradigm, I guess you could say, the way that they thought they would be doing business every year. It changed, and this is the crossover that did it. This was the event. So for another reason, it was a big deal because it wasn't a crossover where you had to get all the books to understand what was going on. It was a unique approach. So they had Uncanny XMen, XFactor, and New Mutants. You could read only one of those titles and you would understand the whole event. You might not know all the details that were happening to all the characters in the other books if you only read one of those titles, but you understood how it was affecting the Marvel Universe. So one of the things that I loved as a kid, but then also now as an adult, is you could read this event in one of your favorite titles and not have to go out and pick a bunch of other books you wouldn't normally read. And then the last thing I'll say about it is that it completely changed a character in a fundamental way, but not the way it's done today, where you take the legacy of the character and you crap all over it, and then you shove it in front of people and say, you will like this, and if you don't, you're a bigot. So the character was Angel, and I mentioned that in the previous year's event, Mutant Massacre, he got crucified. He was literally stuck to a wall with his wings mutilated, and they had to be amputated to save his life. Well, the villain Apocalypse got a hold of him, transformed him into Archangel, and basically replaced his feathered wings with these metal bladed wings where he could shoot the feathers. I think they described them as knives back then. He could eject the knives out of his wings, and they were laced with poison.
Yeah, that's sick.
Oh, yeah. He got changed from kind of a goody two-shoes type of character into a vicious assassin. And Apocalypse named him one of his 4 horsemen.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just absolute. As a young kid, I mean, I was like 12, 13, I don't know, something like that. I was reading this going, wow. Again, it rocked my world because I'd never seen a character taken from one type and then completely transformed, but elevated at the same time.
He was Death, wasn't he? And the 4 Horsemen, he was Death.
He was Death, yeah. The Horseman of Death.
George, surely you have to appreciate Archangel. Right, moving on. Leroy says, any Fantastic Four book, they're all the same, so it doesn't really matter. Man, chat is lighting everyone up. It's hilarious. I can't stand Cyclops. I don't recognize the grey bearded man on the paddle with no hat flashing LED lights. Manifesto keeps it on track by saying the NAM is a great series. We have, did I read this one? Number 7, Uncanny XMen 141, 142, Days of Future Past.
I almost picked that one.
Jaro says for 8 he had Hulk, Future, Imperfect, and 7 Fantastic, 4 Unthinkable. I read 7 Leroy. You know how it works. You have to wait till the guests have finished their picks, then we do your picks in the chat. If you don't read my picks, I'm never streaming with you again.
Oh, wah.
Is Joe just going to tell us about everything that happened to the X-Men in the 80s?
I'd like to, but no, sadly not.
Jean Grey, shocking. George is smiling through his pain. Good man. Mortal V, I'll read it. I don't want to. He probably smelled her blood. Yeah. I won't read the end of it. Marvel's doing cash grab long before Cecil. Is Thunderbuns trying to kill George? Rob, this is your fault. X filibuster. Someone needs to find out how long he's been talking.
Not long enough.
Coolest angel ever was. Rob got so excited when Thunderbud said the last thing I'll say, but the baby in English too.
Noah, you've been leveling up, my friend. You've been hanging around Mo Biggs. I can tell.
Oh, mate, this is great. All right, so just to make you guys aware, it's an hour show. We have 15 minutes left, and we're at 6.
Oh my gosh! Maybe there'll be a part 2.
I can pick up the pace.
Okay.
What have you got, Dojo?
Number 6 is The Amazing Spider-Man 182 through 204. Now this had various artists and writers. I would say to focus on 194 through 200, though. 194, the origin and first appearance of Black Cat. But this is also through a time where it was thought that May Parker had passed. So this one here was called Requiem. This issue that I'm pointing to with Spider-Man in anguish in the background was the first comic book I ever bought. And I still have that issue on a shelf in my comic room. It's odd for a kid. I was 7 years old, but this is the one I picked up. It didn't have flashy superheroes jumping and all that, but something about this spoke to me, and boy, am I glad it did, because it started a lifelong passion. So that's why I picked this run. It obviously features the Punisher, Captain America as a guest star. It's really a great run. Pollard is an artist on some of these issues. And it features a lot of Spidey's best villains and a couple of his cornier ones like Rocket Racer and Big Wheel. But man, I really liked those too when I was a kid. So I would say that this is a good place to pick up Amazing Spider-Man if you're going back.
George, finally, Spider-Man. Are you happy?
I've never read this.
What?
I've never read it.
You've never read Spider-Man or this run?
Never read those 4 issues.
Okay. So I'll just quickly say I think this is a great pick by Brian, and it's a time where you could, like he said, you could have great antagonists like the Punisher, or you could have just silly, weirdo, forgettable antagonists. But I think this is a good pick because it shows kind of the gambit. You get that one, George? Pun intended. It shows the gambit of storytelling that you could get from Marvel. You could either get very silly, forgettable stories, or you could get really impactful, serious stories. And in this case, you get that and everything in between in one run.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. What have you got, Joe?
So I will quickly go with Savage Sword of Conan. And I'll just say, if you like blood and guts and like brutal fighting and beautiful curvy ladies and big muscular men and steel on bone,
yes.
Savage Sword of Conan, 1970s. Just pick up any collection you want. Written by Roy Thomas, drawn by John Buscema. Phenomenal. And I will simply say, so this is out of my library. So this is a kind of a coffee table book called Conan the Phenomenon. So you look at that, it's a very famous painting by Frank Frazetta of Conan. And then here is, let's see, this is from Marvel Treasury Edition number 4. So it's actually Art by Barry Windsor Smith. This was from 1975. And I will say that this is one of the few comic book series I'm aware of where you could get almost a painting in comic book form in just about every issue.
How good was Frazetta, George?
He was the best. He was the best fantasy artist ever. His covers for the Conan paperbacks are the reason why I started reading Conan to begin with.
Attaboy.
Okay, I would ask George more about it, but Leroy says number 6, Spider-Man Clone Wars.
No. How dare you, Leroy?
No, that's a thumbs down from the whole panel, I think.
Leroy, are you drinking your breakfast again?
Amazing Spider-Man 121, 122, the night Gwen Stacy died.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great one.
Oh, mate, chat is lighting people up. Craven's Last Hunt, number 6.
That was one of your picks, wasn't it, George?
Elevator
That's my number 1.
Gentlemen. NTM says, I will simply say famous last words. You're going to have to sort him out, Joe.
I tell you, I might have to get Daddy's belt.
All right, what have you got, Dojo? We at, 6 or 5 now?
Number 5 now.
Beautiful.
So number 5, I'm going with Avengers Volume 3, the whole run of 1 through 34 with Busiek and Perez. But if you're going to focus, I'd say focus on 1 through 5 and 32 through 34. So 1 through 5, they face Morgane Le Fay, and they are all enchanted to believe and be embodied by like medieval times. And I love that play on magic time travel, which sometimes can go awry, but I think it was handled very well here. And then in 32 through 34, they face Graviton, which I'll be honest, it's basically written as if they were facing Superman. So it's great, the dynamic that occurred, and it did cross over, by the way, with Thunderbolts, where they continue to face Graviton as well. So it was tough not to put everything Perez at the top of my list because I'm just such a huge fan. But as you can see, he'll appear a few times on my list, but this is my number 5 pick.
You guys are nearly making me cry from laughter. George, have you read this run?
No.
No.
Are you shaking your head? No.
I
Joe,
didn't.
have you read it?
I have not read that particular run. No, I'm not a fan of Busiek.
Oh, okay.
McIntyre says top 10 Marvel books, none of them, they are all equally good as toilet paper. Leroy says number 5, that one issue where Cyclops sleeps with Jean Grey. All right, Joe, what have you got?
I have got. Let me see. Okay, so my next pick is Marvel 1602. And this is a bit of an unconventional one. This was written by Neil Gaiman and drawn by Andy Kubert. And this is the hardcover collection. Let's get some art. Basically, it's almost like a what if story or an Elseworlds story, where it's like the Marvel universe existing in the year 1602 in Elizabethan England. And so part of it for me when I initially bought it was just that. It was the story idea. But I want to get to another bit of artwork here. One of the things I really liked was that the covers on this miniseries were done in a style where it looked like they were old-fashioned woodcuts, which really, I think, added to the feel of it. So here you can see Daredevil, but basically all of the names were changed. Like Peter Parker is Peter Parquar. It's like an alternate history of the Marvel universe if it existed in Elizabethan England. But beyond that, it's not just that it's, if it was just that gimmick, then I wouldn't have really been interested in it. But the way that Neil Gaiman weaves all of these different characters, from Doctor Strange to Nick Fury to Spider-Man to the X-Men, I mean, it goes on and on and on. And he weaves it all into one coherent narrative. And one of my favorite moments is that the Fantastic Four encounter the equivalent of Doctor Doom. And there's a moment, I wish I would have had time to get it marked. I'd show it. I'll just show this right here. Basically, the Thing, Ben Grimm, is imprisoned in this tower, and he's trying to break out. And there's this kind of plot and subplot going on. And there's this moment where Reed Richards is basically saying, I'm going to try and make this as short as possible. Basically, he's saying that life is so strange that you never know why certain things happen to certain people. And no matter how strange it is, you could basically say that we're all characters in a story. And there was this really nicely handled meta commentary on how important comic book storytelling is to lives of readers, but at the same time, he was directly talking about things happening in this book. So I realize this is kind of going off the board, but I really think that anybody who is used to reading novels, biographies, anything other than comics, they might get into this, which could then introduce them to a whole world of comic book storytelling.
Have you read that one, Brian?
No, I haven't. It sounds interesting. I might have to pick that up.
All right. What have we got in chat?
People giving us shit.
I've got to stop reading it. It is quite funny, though. Number 5, Wolverine, 1982, 1-4. Frank Miller, Wolverine Mini.
Same one, yep.
Is that your favorite one, George?
He unmutes just to go,
Peter Parkour.
Close. Not quite.
Okay. All right. Brian, what do you have for us?
Okay. Up next, sorry, George. Number 4, Uncanny X-Men, the run with John Byrne and Chris Claremont. And I'm saying to focus on basically the arcs that lead through the Alpha Flight's first appearance, the Hellfire Club, which led to the Dark Phoenix saga, and the Days of Future Past. It was hard to narrow it down, but I say 129 through 142, which I realize is still a big group of comics. What's that, like 12 or 13 issues, but phenomenal. And the second comic I ever bought was X-Men number 126.
I've got the omnibuses on my shelf, so I second this pick.
Great characterization. It's a team that acts as a family, but still has conflict within. It's man against man, man against nature, and man against himself many times.
George, have you tried this run of X-Men?
Yes.
Not your cup of tea.
No, I could drink a cup of tea and be more excited than reading that book.
Oh, God. George is straight savage tonight.
Understand that he's the exception, though. I mean, this was hugely popular.
Oh,
when that run was happening, X-Men's sales were skyrocketing, which meant that Marvel's sales across the line were being lifted up. And that was when they started really saying, hey, we've really got something here with the Uncanny X-Men. Maybe we should start thinking about branching out. And it wasn't too long after that run where you started to see other X books like the New Mutants, XFactor, Excalibur, so on and so forth.
All right, what have you got, Joe?
So real quickly, because it was already mentioned in the chat, it's the Wolverine miniseries written by Chris Claremont, drawn by Frank Miller. And I'll just add that one of the reasons why I like it so much, there's two really. One is that it was a totally unconventional take, in my opinion, on expanding a character's depth. So George mentioned he didn't really like Wolverine. And up to that point, there wasn't really a whole lot there. You either liked him as he was presented, this little short guy berserker with the claws, or you didn't. It was usually one or the other. But that miniseries really gave a lot of depth to his character. It took him over to Japan. I won't go into all the details, but he basically, you see that he's got kind of this samurai ethos, and all kinds of personal turmoil went on with him. So personally, I think it's a fantastic story.
All right, we've got some number 4s in chat. Old Man Logan. Leroy says that issue where Wolverine sleeps with Jean Grey. Uncanny XMen 129 to 138, Dark Phoenix Saga. Iconic story arc diminished by bringing Jean Grey back. Wow, that's a surprise that they would do something like that. Shocking.
Well, that was in Claremont and Byrne's defense, that was an edict from the executives at Marvel.
Of Mice and Men. All right, Dojo. Top 3.
All right, let's move along then. Number 3, the Fantastic Four. Another huge run, but I'm going to say focus on 242 through 250. It is some great character development for Sue Storm. They face Doctor Doom 2 times during this era. 249 and 250, they face Gladiator, and 250 has them facing a number of superheroes, including Gladiator, on the cover. There's more to the story than meets the eye, though. I won't wreck that for anybody who wants to pick that up. I have on here, real quick, the Fantastic Four Annual number 18. It's the wedding of Medusa and Black Bolt. And, you know, I'm not really keen on romance and weddings, but John Byrne wrote a soliloquy by the, I guess, I don't know, it's an Inhuman. So the pastor, the officiator, whatever, that I actually typed up on a separate piece of paper and used in a wedding. It's that well written. I just thought it was so cool about, you know, although, you know, custom dictates that other people are present and that someone else marries these folks, it is they who marry each other is how it starts. And I just think it's a great commentary about weddings.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but in the cartoon, Juggernaut tries to punch Gladiator, and he absorbs that punch and then throws Juggernaut into the river or the water. Is that right?
I can see that happening because of Gladiator's specific power set, but I haven't seen the cartoon you're talking about.
I thought Gladiator was awesome when I saw it.
Oh.
I haven't read the comics. I've only seen him in cartoon form, but I thought he's a cool character.
Oh, yeah, I like him a lot.
You like the Mohawk, don't you?
No, you know, I feel at home. George, Fantastic Four, surely.
No.
What?
I'll say that this is a good pick, and I'll just quickly say that yes, Noah, I said quickly that when Byrne took over the Fantastic Four, I didn't like the fact that he got the Thing off the team and replaced him with She-Hulk, but he quickly won me over, and she became a great addition to the team. And I think that if you like team books or you like books where family is a good component, this was a great example of how you could have 4 people be a family even if they're not all related. And there's lots of action and great comic book fun, you know, all the way through.
All right, cool. Joe, number 3.
So it was mentioned earlier by the chat, Marvels by Alex Ross and Kurt Busiek. I think that it was a great. And again, I'm trying to think of people who don't normally read comics, and I think if you show them, now this isn't Marvels, but this is a book of Alex Ross's art, and
That's sick.
that page of Galactus is from the Marvel story. I just think
awesome.
if you show somebody Marvels and the entire book is made of paintings like this, the way that the pages are composed and the way that the story is written from the perspective of a reporter who was looking at all of these superhumans and what they can do, I think this might be a good way to get someone into comics is Marvels.
Yeah. I really like Alex Ross's artwork in general. I think it's crazy. It's such a different, unique style as well.
It was hard not to put things like that on my list. And the Earth X is another one that Alex Ross did.
Mate, there are some people that really do not like Marvel.
I wonder why they're here.
Leroy's saying, you better read my pick, Rob. I really don't want to, Leroy. Where is it? Okay, let's start here. Fantastic Four, 48 to 50, the Galactus trilogy. Yeah,
Random Text has had the best list tonight. The best. Like, and all of his picks.
Yeah, that's a backhanded.
No, it's not.
No, it's a good. I'll say this: it's a good pick. I intentionally stayed away from the Kirby Lee years, if you want to call them that, just because as a comic reader, almost my entire life, I love that stuff. But I understand that there's a lot of stuff in there that could be seen as quote unquote too outdated for someone to enjoy if they've never read comics before. So that's the only reason why I stayed away from it.
I would agree with that.
All right, 3. The one where Cyclops and Wolverine say forget Jean Grey and then sleep with each other.
Thanks, Leroy.
The Richest Man in Babylon. Heart of Darkness, Punisher, Ghost Rider, Wolverine.
Oh, that's
That's
good.
a good one.
George is my favorite. Yes, George is my favorite too.
I Borrow Ideas says nothing has aged George faster than this panel.
Oh, boy.
Planet Hulk.
Planet Hulk is actually very good.
That almost made my list.
We're here for the excellent YouTube talent. Jim Cox says Marvel doesn't have a top 10. Kirby on Fantastic Four was greatness. I'm shocked that everyone is so pro DC, anti Marvel here in general. I don't think anyone else is. Okay, Dojo.
Okay, on to number 2. This one here I narrowed down quite a bit rather than having like a 40-issue run. This 3-issue run on the Avengers that comes in at number 2. Jim Shooter is the author, George Perez the artist. It's got great vision, character development, and this is one of the times where they face Ultron. And, you know, they had this evil undying, this evil undefeated, and they like to play on that. But this here was my introduction to the Avengers, was this 3-issue arc. And, you know, when I first saw, you know, Attacked by Ant-Man, why are, you know, Scarlet Witch, Wonder Man, and Vision so anguished because they have ants all over them? But there was more to the story than, you know, just a bunch of ants crawling on you. So it turned out that this was very well written. And, you know, it started me in the comic book fandom. So I think that it would be great to recommend this to others as well.
And all the choices have been like an old style comics. There's no new type comics at all, is there? Nothing.
There's nothing new that I would recommend. No.
I think the newest was my recommendation of 1602, and that was published, I want to say it was in the 2000s. Yeah, 2003, 2004.
It's crazy. That's just, I mean, that says it all, really.
Yeah.
Have you read this one, Joe?
I'm trying to remember. I probably did. Other than the issue with the ants all over them, that's more of a thematic cover than anything else. I do specifically remember reading that issue. The other ones don't ring a bell, but it's been so many years that I could have easily read them and just not remembered. But no, I for the reasons that Brian gave, I think it's great. I was reading just a ton of issues at that time, so I was reading back issues like crazy.
All right, what have you got for us, Joe? Number 2.
Yeah, so I'm going to say the Star Wars comics by Marvel from the 70s, late 70s, early to mid 80s. Just take your pick. I mean, if you're a Star Wars fan, pick them up. And I'm putting this in as my pick for people who maybe like other stuff. They're involved in other fandoms, but they never got into comics. because in the late 70s through the early 90s, Marvel had a great track record of adapting other properties like Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and producing comics. So I would just say, if you like Star Wars, pick up any of the original run of the Marvel Star Wars comics.
George, do I dare ask you if you've read this one?
I have not.
I have not.
I got one.
Eric McIntyre says the newest Darth Vader is very good. I enjoyed it. That's good. What have we got in chat? We have Garfield, Daredevil 177 or 181, the Elektra Saga.
That's excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Leroy says Deadpool manga.
No.
John Byrne She-Hulk.
I know someone on panel excited to see that.
Almost
Yes.
made my list.
Oh, then you know two someones.
Who is older, George or Brian? George is the beginning. Darth Vader had a 10 to 12 issues run that is very good.
That might actually be close.
Champions by Mark Waid and that other guy.
No.
I think that's it.
So we're at number one, right? Number one all time.
All right. So, George, I think that in your eyes and in K Manifesto's eyes, I might be redeeming myself right here.
Okay.
Okay. In Random Task, I'm with you. My number one pick is the Frank Miller run on Daredevil. Yes.
Thank you.
This and I got to tell you guys, John Byrne and George Perez are my all-time favorites as far as artists go, but I could not discount the fact that this was so well written. The art is a specific style that I can't say is my favorite, but is still phenomenal. And if you're going to focus on anything, I would say 179 through 182, where Elektra and Daredevil fight, Bullseye and Elektra fight, and then Daredevil deals with the ramifications, the result of that battle. These books were my introduction to Frank Miller, to this style, and Bullseye has long been one of my favorite villains. I can't say enough about this run, but this run also includes The Hand, Kingpin, Power Man and Iron Fist, and even Stilt Man was written in such a way that you would believe, hard to believe, but you would believe him to be a threat.
This is the book, Rob, if you remember last week when I was telling you about Daredevil playing Russian roulette with the character in the hospital bed. That's that last issue he has on his screen right there. It's 193, I believe. That's the book
181.
191. That's the book I was recommending for you to read, just that one issue.
Yes.
I'm so happy that your choice wasn't an X-Men series. Just I don't know if I could have handled the disappointment on George's face. It would have been too much for him. Yeah, George loves this. He talks about it sometimes, quite often. So it's great.
I don't often talk about Daredevil, but I will say I love that Brian picked this because I was really torn between this one and my number one pick, and I'm really happy Brian picked it because it's phenomenal. You can't go wrong.
Thank you.
I'm surprised we haven't seen Kraven's Last Hunt, unless that's coming up right now from Joe.
Well, funny you should say that.
Oh!
I really felt my heart just like...
Look at that, Joe. We're both redeemed.
Yep. George will still talk to us. So this is Kraven's Last Hunt. This is my favorite all-time story arc in comics. And I didn't pick it just because of that, although it was tempting. Like I said, I almost picked what Brian picked for Daredevil. I almost picked his number one. So I'm really happy I chose this instead, so we can introduce people to both of them. So this is a Marvel Select hardcover edition. It collects the entire run. And there are so many reasons why I love this, but I'll just highlight a couple. The art is by Mike Zeck. I should say the penciler is Mike Zeck. The inker is Bob McLeod. And Jim Salicrup was the editor during this run. He doesn't get a lot of love as an editor, but his tenure was short, but it was excellent, in my opinion.
I would agree.
So basically, what this is about, for people who aren't aware, is Spider-Man has this villain named Kraven the Hunter, and he had, up until this point, basically been a joke. And J.M. DeMatteis completely... I mean, I'm just going to show these couple of pages to start off with. He completely reimagined Kraven as this insane, driven... I don't want to say psychotic, although that might be the best word for it, villain that up until this point, I had never seen a villain like this, especially one that had been treated as kind of a goofball early on. And so this is a fantastic example of how a good or a great writer can take a character that people basically write off and turn them into just a force of nature. If you've got the right artist and the writer who can, get on the same page and just tell a great story, you can fix any character if you give the creators the time and the creative freedom to do it. So I'm going to jump ahead now to another part later in the story where you've got this villain named Vermin, and he's basically this guy that was turned into this Ratman type of character. And it's just such a phenomenal job of showing a character who's, yes, he's disgusting, yes, he's filthy, but he's also tragic. And he does horrific things in the story, and yet the writer and the artist are able to portray him in a way that you can actually feel empathy for him, which is just, it's like a masterclass in storytelling. And down here, you've got this case where Kraven has basically lost his mind, and one of the things he's trying to do is kind of make Spider-Man live up to his potential in a way. And because Kraven is losing his mind, it's not entirely clear what that's all about, but you find out during the course of the story. So one of the things Kraven does is he buries Spider-Man alive and then goes out in Spider-Man's costume and like plays the role of Spider-Man the way he thinks it should be played. There's just so much going on in this story. At the end of the day, Spider-Man goes through extreme hardship, extreme difficulty. He's forced to confront his own psyche in addition to like good old-fashioned, beat 'em up type of storytelling. And at the end of the day, you knew that Spider-Man was never going to be the same again. It was very consequential in this run. And I'm not going to give away how it ends. I encourage everybody to read it.
Wow. That was like torturing George for an hour and a half. Only for the commandos to come in at the last moment and rescue him. That was great. Let's have a look what chat is saying. Random Task says Fantastic Four Annual Number 2964, the
That's
fantastic origin of Doctor Doom. George?
That's a good one.
Yeah, I love Doctor Doom. Anything Doctor Doom was tremendous.
Sometimes, quite often, says Rob. Yep, that was good English. Jaro says Silver Surfer Parable.
That's a great one. That's art by Mobius. Great story.
That one,
Yeah.
Yes, that is good.
Are there any other number ones?
There was another. I thought maybe I missed it. It might have been. No, keep on going.
Leroy says insane drive, psychotic villain like Joker.
Those two traits similar, but very, very different motivations for villains. Yeah, very different. Yeah.
Number one, Daredevil Yellow by the Splintering, and Gary G comes in with Daredevil 227 to 233 Born Again, which we did mention earlier. That's the David Mazzucchelli run.
Yeah, George, wasn't that on your list for last week?
No, I had the Frank Miller alone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And K Manifesto has Secret Wars.
I was tempted to put that in, but I didn't just because I thought that a person brand new to comics might be lost if they tried to read that, but I was tempted.
Oh, Leroy says, Dark Knight Returns. Let's not scare off people from comics with Marvel. What's Daredevil Yellow about, George?
Daredevil Yellow is from the creators that did Long Halloween, Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb, and it imagines Daredevil's origins. Daredevil, when he was first created, wore a yellow costume, so it's him in his early days.
Gary G says, did you say this one?
Yes, Born Again, excellent choice.
Excellent.
Wow. That was really cool, guys. Chat was just lighting everyone up. I found it hilarious. I don't know how I had to bite my lip at some points from not laugh when you guys were talking. From some of the stuff they were saying was just ridiculous.
I make it a policy when I'm a guest on a show to try to not look at the chat, and I'm glad I didn't, because I think I would have probably derailed myself several times.
Yeah, I'll go back and read them all, but I've got a thick skin. It'll be fine.
Robbie's hating on the chat. Say, what? Where are there numbers? I'm not seeing the numbers. I didn't read Hockey's. I didn't read Eric's. Where are they?
No, I think Rob has enjoyed the chat today.
Oh, that's been hilarious. Is Craven the guy who looks like Freddie Mercury in Hunt SpiderMan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Eric McIntyre says America Chavez was his number one.
Ah, beautiful.
And Hockey put DC
says,
crossover.
I've got those books signed by the entire team.
That's phenomenal, Jasper.
What's your address, Jasper? Just for no reason in particular. Improby says, good Spidey pick, but I still prefer the Roger Stern and John Romita Jr. run in 82-83.
I was tempted to include it, believe me.
Bendis New Avengers?
No. Sorry. Can't do it.
F numbers. And the thing, you guys forget Rob can't read. And if there's no numbers there, it's very, very hard for me to see it.
That's true.
Louis says number one is Gay Captain America. All right.
Which one is that? There have been so many at this point.
The one with the trash can.
The trash can lid for a shield.
Yeah. Rob lost his last few IQ points when he got his 4 hairs cut.
Hey now.
Eric McIntyre says, are you doing the top 10 image books next week? If you are, I can't make it because I don't like any image books.
Count me out with that one.
Just a writer.
Although, Rob, if you decide to do one that's indie but not CG, I wouldn't be in there I couldn't give you 10, but I'd be in there from the chat. I'd give you a couple that I really, really like, but couldn't help you.
Leroy would love this. 10 worst Marvel books next.
I've avoided entire decades just so I don't know what the worst Marvel books are.
Wow, that was crazy. So just a couple of things. Joe has a YouTube channel. I put the link down in the description. Go subscribe. But quickly, Joe, I just wanted to talk to you. George and Leroy did a review on Only Death Can Save Us now. And the art got crazy high scores. I think A- and A+ from both of them, if I remember correctly. You're doing a Bronze Age storybook. Is that right? A Bronze Age comic?
Close. It's inspired heavily by Bronze Age storytelling from Marvel and DC, but the art style is not of that era. It's more like a fusion between the Bronze Age and modern comic book art.
It bodes. My point is, it bodes well that you've hired an artist who's getting such high scores for art. If you're doing a story that's even if it is a fusion of the two, I think is really cool.
Yeah, I did listen to that review from George and Leroy, and I tweeted it out because I thought those guys did a fantastic job reviewing the book, and I'm not saying that out of bias towards Russ because he's working with me. I really do like the way that Leroy and George review books because a lot of times reviewers are vague and they just tell you kind of their feelings about it, but they don't give you specific reasons. And those two guys really break down specific categories that they rank, and then they tell you why they gave it the score that they did. And if they would have liked to have given it a higher score, then they'll tell you why. But they're very honest and they're very comprehensive, which I, as a customer, appreciate. So I thought it was a great review.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
with reviews, like I've had quite a few, and some of them are all just like, "Oh, this is the best thing ever," and you don't really get much feedback or critique or improvement that you can make from it.
You don't learn anything from the review as a creator.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I like George and Leroy's reviews. I think they're cool. George and Eric are getting into a chat war here. I'm disappointed in you, George. Disappointed. Let me sum up the entire issue 1 to 104.
Wow. I at least liked issues 1 through, I think, 3.
And let's have a look here we have Dojo Kun. He's picked up a couple of backers since I last checked.
Nice.
We're at 80. I did not know that. Awesome.
What were you on before? What was the last time you checked?
Well, the last time I checked, we were at 77. So that's wonderful.
Sick. That's awesome. Give us a quick rundown of this, Brian.
Okay, I'm good at the quick one. So it's 4-issue miniseries that's gathered in this trade paperback. It's the 4 issues that began my connected superhero universe. There's a regular cover and 5 variants, including a limited edition hardcover. That limited edition, 32 of them are already gone. So if you'd like the hardcover by the Barton Brothers, please get in there and get that opportunity. There's a new print available now by my artist Zilson Costa, which is a crossover between 3 of my characters and then 10 other characters from CG that are Cheesecake, if you will. That's that print right there. It'll be printed on metal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right there. Exactly. The art is by Mike Salter on issues 1 and 2 in the trade paperback, and then Zilson Costa in numbers 3 and 4. Both of them have a unique style, but they're both great in my opinion. Zilson and I were on Comics Cast yesterday, and we had earlier today, and we had a great time going through Siamese and the perks and add-ons and all that. I have to say thank you so much to those of you who have backed. And this miniseries will go into the miniseries Deanna Hammer of the Angels, and we're almost done with number 1 of that one. We're on page 19 of 22, so we're rocking and rolling on that one. That should perhaps be out this year. And we'll probably be crowdfunding that. And in addition to that, we've got a lot going on at Dojo Kun Comics where we are doing a trading card set. I've got a trilogy of novels that I have licensed to turn into graphic novels. So there's a lot coming up. But this here will get you into the Dojo Kun universe. And hopefully you'll like it and come back for more.
And this is your first crowdfund, yeah?
Yes, it is. I published 12 comic books before, but this is my first crowdfund.
Congratulations on getting funded.
Thank you.
It's a lot harder than people think it is, and you're well above that goal now, which is great. You've got 10 days left. This is going to be over 100 pages. So yeah, links in the description, guys. If you hadn't checked it out, go have a look and consider backing it if you can. George, final thoughts?
I think we all have very different tastes around here.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
I would want to do like a top 1 recommendation of independent books, like CG books.
Did you not listen to what I said last week?
No, he didn't.
When I had multiple different publishers from multiple different decades, that it was not just 10 DC books or 10 Marvel books, that had crowdfunding, that had Alterna, that had publishers that don't exist anymore. Like, did you not listen to anything I said? I was recommending for very specific people, and I specifically said, Rob, I think you should read this book, which was an independent title.
I appreciate you, George, even if Rob doesn't. I listened, and I appreciate you.
Don't make me the bad guy. what I was going to say, George, was have like one recommendation from 10 different people. That is what I was going to say. Not a top 10 list of independent, Comicsgate books. Because I think it's way too hard to have a top 10 of Comicsgate books because there hasn't been enough comics. Mate, I've done it like 3 times today. I don't mean to do it. It just happens.
Johnny,
to be fair to Rob, Leroy does it too. So does Mike. So do I. I mean, it's kind of like a rite of passage. You piss off George, you're part of the club.
Awesome. I'm in.
But I will say, Rob, in all seriousness, I do think that is a good idea. Like, I have a pick from Dark Horse. I don't know if anybody else has read it, but I picked it up at San Diego Comic-Con in 2008 because I thought it looked completely different from anything else on the market and yet very compelling. And so I would give that as my one recommendation.
Oh, and I showed this to George last week because he didn't believe me that I had it.
Oh, there you go.
That's nice. I've got to add that to my collection.
I do have those issues.
It came on my radar last year, and I've had it on my list. But seeing you guys talk about it last week, I think I've got to bump it up.
So George, the person that painted that book, Joe, was David Wenzel, who did the Solomon Kane stories in the backup of Savage Sword.
Yep.
So you probably are familiar with his work.
Yep.
And I believe that's 3 issues long, Joe, when you go to pick that up.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe we could do an independent book like the smaller like Image, Dark Horse, one of those, and then maybe like a CG book as well. Like so, two recommendations total. We could have 5 people on the panel. I don't know. I'll throw it out there.
Sounds like fun, man. Whether I'm there or not, I'll if I'm not on the panel, I'll be listening for sure.
Cool. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Dojo, anything you want to say before we go?
Just also watch for on Thursday nights at 8, the K Manifesto with Dojo Kun Comics Show. We have topics. We have great guests. This week we'll have Rob Arnold. We'll have Mark Polton, The Moral Compass, and we'll have George Travelos.
Awesome. Joe?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in for this show. It was a lot of fun for me, and I hope it was fun for the people in the audience. It's one of those things where, as comic nerds, we can talk about what we like all day long, but I really did enjoy trying to put together a list for people who maybe never had read comics and trying to think about the different types of people out there and what might get them interested into comics. So this was not my personal top 10 list, but I hope that there's something out there that, if you in the audience, if you like Marvel 1602, if that doesn't appeal to you, but you know of somebody who it might appeal to, please pass on the recommendation. Because if that gets them into comics, then that's a win for all of us. And so, thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me on the show. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah, my channel is called Fulton Land. If people want to check it out, FultonLand. We'd love to have you drop by, and I had a lot of fun today. Thank you, everybody.
It was great. Thank you.
You have to run.
Bye, everyone.
My God, see, I'm going to end it. I'm going to press the button right now.